and welcome to Jeff's Baking Blog. Today I'm going to make a light fruit tea loaf. So this is going to be a nice cake, similar to a Madeira cake in fact, but with some dried fruit in it, just mixed through. And I'm using mixed dried fruit which has sultanas and raisins and some chopped mixed peel, but you could use any dried fruit really, cranberries, cherries, currants, whatever you want basically. It's actually a very simple recipe, and I got the idea because somebody asked me if I could make what they called a Windsor tea loaf, which seemed to be a Malay or an Indian cake, and I couldn't find any reference to that or any recipes at all. So I thought I would make this, and maybe it will be something similar, though maybe in a Windsor tea loaf you might have some spices as well, and I'm not putting any spice in this one. So, as I say, it's a very simple recipe, and I start off by lining a 2-pound loaf tin with some parchment paper, like that, and I'm preheating my oven to 170 Celsius, that's 150 Celsius with a fan, 340 Fahrenheit. And as that's preheating, I'll go on to the ingredients. And for this, I have 300 grams, which is 2 cups, based on scooping packed flour into a 250 milliliter cup of plain flour. I have 1 cup of caster sugar. I have 140 grams, which is 2 sticks plus 1 tablespoon of softened unsalted butter. I have 3 large eggs, which would be extra large in the USA. Out of the shell, those eggs weigh 180 grams. And I think that that would work out at about 3.5 medium eggs out of the shell, or 3.5 large eggs out of the shell in the USA. I have 45 millilitres, 3 tablespoons of milk, and I may not need to use all of that. I have the zest from 1 orange and the zest from 1 lemon, 8 grams, 2 teaspoons of baking powder, 1.5 grams, 1/4 teaspoon of salt, and here I have 150 grams of my mixed dried fruit there. And what I have done with that is I have soaked that fruit in 120 millilitres of cold black tea, and then I've drained that off. So I let it soak for about an hour, then I drained it off. And I'm actually going to toss a little bit of flour into that fruit before I put it into cake batter. So I will detail in the ingredients the use of the 120 millilitres of black tea as well. So we'll go on to make the batter, and for that we need to cream the butter and the sugar. But before I cream the butter and the sugar, I'm going to put my zest into the sugar, and I'm just going to rub that between my fingers for 30 seconds or so, just to help release the oils from the zest. So that zest is rubbed in, and that's fine like that. So I'll add my butter in. And I'm going to use my hand mixer to cream that together. You could do it by hand, but I'm using the mixer. That's light and fluffy now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the eggs one at a time and mix those in. And the mixture may curdle, but it doesn't matter, it will come together in the end. The eggs are nicely mixed in now, and I'm going to add in about 2 tablespoons of my milk. I'll hold some of it back. I'm going to whisk that through, that will loosen that up a little bit. That's good like that. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take just about a tablespoon of my flour and put it into my dried fruit, and I'm going to toss that around like that. And that will be ready to go into the cake. And the next thing I want to do is to sift my flour with the baking powder and the salt onto my wet mixture. So I'm just going to mix the baking powder and the salt into the flour a little bit, and then I'm going to sift that onto the wet mixture. And with that sifted, I'm going to fold that in and then once it's almost all folded in, I'm going to add in my dried fruit as well. And this is where the extra, or the retained milk comes in. If I need to loosen the batter a little bit, I will use the remaining milk. So I'll put my fruit in. And I'll fold that through to get that nicely distributed. That looks quite good. I'm just going to add about a teaspoon of the milk. I think that will just loosen it a little bit. I'll mix that through. And then I'm going to put that into my prepared pan. I'll scoop that into the pan, and then I'm going to spread that out and level it off. So with that in, I'm just going to use my offset spatula, the little small one, to spread that, making sure to go into the corners. So that's levelled off quite nicely, and it will level off more in the oven. My oven is preheated, so I'm going to put this into the oven, and I'm going to bake it for between an hour and an hour and 15 minutes, so 60 to 75 minutes. I will test it after 60 minutes with a skewer, and if the skewer comes out clean, I'll take it out of the oven. If it doesn't, I will leave it in the oven and test it every 5 minutes. And certainly by 75 minutes it should be coming out clean. And then once it does that, I take it out and put it onto a wire rack, leaving it in the pan for at least 10 minutes, and then I'll transfer it out of the pan onto the wire rack and let it cool completely. And once it's cooled, I'll come back and show you the results. I baked the light fruit cake for 75 minutes. I tested it after 60 minutes and it was wet in the centre. It had risen as I expected and split along the top as it tends to do in these loaf cakes, but it was still wet in the centre. So I left it for 10 minutes and tested it, and it was still a bit wet, moist, so I left it for a further 5 minutes. So after 75 minutes the skewer came out clean. So I took it out of the oven, I left it in the tin for 10 minutes, and then I transferred it to a wire rack. So I've now cut it, and this is what it looks like. And it's baked up very nicely, I have to say. And I've taken a couple of slices. So I'll just break a piece off and have a taste of it. Nice and tender crumb. It's quite moist, and it has just a hint of the citrus from the zest, and then of course you've got the juiciness of the fruits as well. So this is a very easy cake to make, and it's very tasty. Perfect with a cup of tea or a cup of coffee mid-morning or mid-afternoon. So that's going to be it for this recipe. I hope you've enjoyed it, and if you have, please give me the thumbs up below and click to subscribe to my YouTube channel. In the top right hand corner of the screen there will be an eye that you can click on, and that will take you to a link for the recipe, and I'll put a link below the video as well, and I'll be back with another recipe in the very near future. So until then, happy baking.